Welcome to Cosmic Whispers, where cosmic mysteries come alive. Your journey beyond the stars begins now. The Sahara Desert stretches across northern Africa like a vast ocean of sand and rock, covering an area of 9.2 million square kilometers. It is a place of extremes, where daytime temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius. Annual rainfall measures less than 25 millimeters in many regions, and fierce winds constantly reshape the landscape. To most, this harsh environment represents the antithesis of agriculture, a barren expanse where conventional farming seems impossible. Yet beneath this forbidding surface lies an unexplored frontier in humanity's quest for sustainable food production. As global population continues to surge toward 10 billion by 2050, agricultural scientists are increasingly turning their attention to what were once considered uninhabitable regions. The world's deserts, which constitute 33% of Earth's land surface, represent both our greatest challenge and perhaps our greatest opportunity. Among these, the Sahara stands as the ultimate test case, a place where traditional agriculture has always existed only at the margins, in scattered oases or along the life-giving Nile. The concept of transforming deserts into productive farmland is not new. For decades, irrigation projects have attempted to green the desert's edge in countries like Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria. Yet these efforts have often proved unsustainable, depleting precious groundwater faster than it can be replenished. Today, scientists are pursuing a fundamentally different approach. Instead of transforming the desert to suit our crops, they're transforming our crops to suit the desert. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, Cosmic Whispers is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free and it helps us grow this community together. This revolution begins at the molecular level, where advances in genetic engineering are creating plants with unprecedented resistance to drought, heat, and salinity. The emergence of CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology in 2012 fundamentally changed the game, allowing scientists to make precise modifications to plant genomes with remarkable speed and accuracy. What once required decades of selective breeding can now be accomplished in months. At the International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas, headquartered in Morocco after relocating from Syria due to civil war, researchers have identified key genetic pathways that control how plants respond to environmental stress. By manipulating these pathways, they've developed experimental crop varieties that can thrive with minimal water, withstand temperature fluctuations of 40 degrees Celsius between day and night, and extract moisture from morning dew rather than depending on rainfall. These projects represent more than academic curiosity. They address an urgent humanitarian need in regions bordering the Sahara, collectively known as the Sahel, where more than 100 million people face chronic food insecurity. Climate change is already pushing the desert southward, with the Sahara expanding by approximately 10% since 1920. Villages that once sustained themselves through traditional agriculture now find their fields transformed into sand, driving migration and conflict across the region. The genetic revolution in desert agriculture thus arrives at a critical moment in human history. As Dr. Fatima Benkirain of the University of Marrakesh's Desert Ecology Institute explains, we are not merely pursuing an interesting scientific question. We are racing against time to secure food sources for millions of people living on the desert's edge, and potentially billions more as climate change alters agricultural patterns worldwide. Nature has already solved many of the problems that challenge desert agriculture. In the most extreme environments on Earth, plants have evolved remarkable adaptations that allow them to survive and even thrive. These evolutionary innovations now serve as the blueprint for scientists developing crops for arid regions. Consider the humble mesquite, a desert legume native to the American Southwest and northern Mexico. Its roots can plunge more than 50 meters below the surface in search of water, making it one of the deepest rooting plants on the planet. Or the jojoba, whose waxy leaves minimize water loss through transpiration. Perhaps most impressive is the resurrection plant Selaginella lepidophylla, which can lose up to 95% of its cellular water during drought and remain dormant for years, only to spring back to life within hours when water returns. Desert plants are nature's ultimate stress engineers, explains Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, botanist at the African Institute for Desert Studies in Timbuktu, Mali. They've evolved cellular mechanisms to protect against protein denaturation during extreme heat, enzymatic pathways to detoxify salt accumulation, and metabolic shortcuts that maximize photosynthetic efficiency while minimizing water loss. Scientists are now identifying the genes responsible for these remarkable traits and transferring them to food crops. The process begins with comprehensive genetic sequencing of desert-adapted plants, followed by comparative analysis with conventional crop genomes to identify the specific genes responsible for drought and heat tolerance. One breakthrough came from researchers at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia, who identified a gene in the date palm, Phoenix dactylifera, that produces a specialized heat shock protein. This protein essentially acts as a molecular chaperone, preventing other proteins from misfolding under heat stress. When transferred to wheat, this single gene increased the crop's heat tolerance by up to 8 degrees Celsius in greenhouse trials. Similarly, scientists at the University of Cape Town have isolated genes from the Namib Desert's Welwitschia mirabilis, one of the strangest plants on Earth, and capable of surviving more than 1,000 years in a region receiving less than 50 millimeters of annual rainfall. These genes regulate the production of specialized sugars that stabilize cellular membranes during dehydration, essentially allowing plant cells to enter a state of suspended animation during drought periods. Perhaps the most promising approach combines genes from multiple desert-adapted species to create crops with complementary survival strategies. No single adaptation will create truly desert-adapted crops, notes Dr. Carlos Rodriguez from Spain's National Research Council. We need to engineer complete adaptive systems, deep roots and water-efficient photosynthesis and heat shock proteins and osmotic regulators. It's a complex puzzle where each piece addresses a different aspect of desert survival. The crassulacean acid metabolism, or CAM photosynthetic pathway, represents one such complete system. Found in cacti and other desert specialists, CAM. Plants open their stomata, leaf pores at night rather than during the day, dramatically reducing water loss. Successfully transferring this entire metabolic pathway into food crops would represent a quantum leap in their drought tolerance, potentially reducing water requirements by up to 80% compared to conventional varieties. Yet, evolution teaches us that every adaptation comes with trade-offs. Desert plants grow slowly, produce fewer seeds, and generally prioritize survival over productivity. The challenge for scientists is to incorporate desert adaptations while maintaining the high yields necessary to feed human populations. It's a delicate balancing act that requires not just genetic engineering, but a fundamental rethinking of what successful agriculture looks like. The genetic toolbox available to today's scientists would have seemed like science fiction just 20 years ago. CRISPR-Cas9 has revolutionized gene editing, but it represents just one instrument in an expanding array of biotechnologies, being deployed to create crops for the Sahara and other arid regions. At the forefront is a technique called multiplex genome engineering, which allows researchers to make multiple genetic changes simultaneously. Traditional genetic modification would insert one trait at a time, drought resistance, then salt tolerance, then heat resistance, explains Dr. Aisha Okafor at the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture in Nigeria. With multiplex EE engineering, we can introduce dozens of beneficial mutations in a single generation, dramatically accelerating the development process. This acceleration is crucial because desert environments present multiple simultaneous challenges. A crop might withstand drought, but succumb to heat stress, or tolerate both but fail when soil salinity increases. The complex nature of desert adaptation requires a similarly complex engineering approach. Consider sorghum, a naturally drought-tolerant grain that originated in the Sahel region. Already well adapted to semi-arid conditions, sorghum serves as an ideal platform for further enhancements. Researchers at the Alliance for Food Security, through genetic innovation, have identified 23 genes in wild sorghum varieties that collectively regulate water use efficiency. By optimizing these genes in commercial varieties and supplementing them with heat tolerance traits from desert plants, they've created experimental sorghum lines that can produce viable grain with just 30% of the water required by conventional varieties. Similar work is underway with cowpea, also known as black-eyed pea, a staple protein source across West Africa. Cowpea is already remarkably drought-tolerant, notes Dr. Ibrahim Touré of the University of Bamako. Some traditional varieties can complete their life cycle with as little as 300 millimeters of rainfall. Our goal is to push that threshold below 200 millimeters, which would extend cultivation capabilities deep into currently non-arable regions. Pearl millet offers another promising candidate. As one of the most heat-tolerant cereal crops, it can produce grain at temperatures that would kill wheat or rice. Genetic engineers are now incorporating genes from extremophile bacteria, organisms that thrive in Earth's most hostile environments, to enhance millet's already impressive stress tolerance. One such gene, isolated from bacteria living in hot springs, codes for an enzyme that remains functional at temperatures up to 70 degrees Celsius, potentially allowing crop metabolism to continue during extreme heat waves. Beyond modifying the plants themselves, scientists are also engineering symbiotic relationships. Soil fungi called mycorrhizae form mutually beneficial associations with plant roots, effectively extending the root system and improving water acquisition. Researchers have identified desert-adapted mycorrhizal strains that can survive extreme conditions and are developing methods to ensure these beneficial fungi colonize the roots of transplanted crops. Similarly, certain bacteria can help plants tolerate environmental stress by producing protective compounds. We've isolated bacillus strains from the Sahara that produce osmoprotectants, molecules that shield plant cells from dehydration, says Dr. Youssef Al-Fayez from Jordan's Royal Scientific Society. When we inoculate crop seedlings with these bacteria, they essentially gain an external support system that supplements their inherent stress tolerance. This holistic approach, engineering not just crops but entire agricultural ecosystems, represents the cutting edge of desert agriculture research. It recognizes that successful adaptation requires coordinated changes across multiple organisms and biological systems. Theory must eventually confront reality, and greenhouse successes must be tested under actual desert conditions. Across northern Africa and the Middle East, experimental stations are now conducting field trials of genetically modified crops designed for extreme aridity. These stations represent the critical bridge between laboratory science and practical agriculture. One of the most ambitious initiatives is the Sahara Agricultural Research Stations Network, a collaboration between 11 countries bordering the desert. Established in 2021 with funding from the African Development Bank, the network maintains standardized testing sites spanning the desert's full east-west extent, from Mauritania to Egypt. Each site imposes slightly different stresses, from the salt-laden winds of coastal regions to the extreme temperature fluctuations of the interior. Consistency is crucial in our evaluation protocols, explains Dr. Mohamed Diallo, the network's scientific director. We need to know exactly how these crop varieties perform under different stress combinations to develop reliable recommendations for farmers. A variety that excels in the Egyptian Eastern Desert might fail completely in the rocky Hamada of Western Algeria. Initial results from these field trials have been promising, if not uniformly successful. A genetically modified barley variety, called Sahara Bright, developed by merging genes from wild barley relatives with stress tolerance genes from the resurrection plant, has demonstrated remarkable resilience. In trials near Aswan, Egypt, it produced 40% of normal yield, with just 15% of standard irrigation, a water use efficiency previously thought impossible. Similarly, GM pearl millet varieties incorporating heat shock proteins from extremophile bacteria consistently matured even when temperatures exceeded 45 degrees Celsius for weeks at a time. This heat tolerance could prove crucial, as climate change pushes temperature extremes even higher across the Sahel region. Not all trials have succeeded, however. A promising drought-tolerant maize variety performed well in greenhouse tests but developed unexpected susceptibility to fungal pathogens when planted in desert soils. The interaction between genetic modifications and the environment remains our greatest challenge, notes Dr. Nadia Benali from Morocco's National Institute for Agricultural Research. We're dealing with complex biological systems that sometimes respond in unpredictable ways. These setbacks highlight the importance of extensive field testing before wide deployment. Most geneticists now recognize that successful crop development requires an iterative process: test, analyze failures, redesign, and test again, rather than a single breakthrough moment. This approach has led to steady incremental improvements rather than dramatic transformations. Beyond technical performance, these field trials also serve another crucial purpose: demonstrating to local communities that genetically modified crops can be both safe and beneficial. There's significant skepticism about GM technology among farmers and consumers in the region, acknowledges Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana's Desert Margins Research Initiative. Seeing these crops perform under actual field conditions helps build trust and acceptance. To further build this trust, many research programs now include participatory elements, inviting local farmers to observe trials, provide feedback on crop performance, and even suggest traditional varieties that might contribute valuable traits. This approach recognizes that indigenous agricultural knowledge, refined over centuries of farming in marginal environments, represents an invaluable resource that complements modern biotechnology. As field trials expand, researchers are already identifying specific genetic combinations that consistently perform well across diverse environments. These core adaptations will likely form the foundation for the first generation of commercially viable desert-adapted crops, plants that could begin transforming agriculture across the arid belt within the next decade. Developing genetically adapted crops represents only half the challenge of desert agriculture. Even the most drought-tolerant plants cannot grow in completely dry soil or withstand the physical impact of sandstorms and extreme heat without supporting infrastructure. As researchers make progress on the biological front, engineers and agricultural planners are developing innovative systems to create viable growing environments in the desert. Water remains the foremost challenge. Our genetically modified crops can survive on minimal water, but minimal doesn't mean zero, emphasizes Dr. Elena Sanchez of the International Desert Agriculture Institute. We need to match biological innovation with equally innovative water management systems. One promising approach comes from the ancient practice of fog water harvesting, modernized with advanced materials. Along coastal desert regions where fog is common, such as Morocco's Atlantic coast and parts of Namibia, researchers have deployed specialized mesh structures that capture moisture from passing fog banks. A single square meter of this mesh can collect up to 5 liters of water daily during foggy periods, enough to sustain several drought-adapted plants. For regions without fog, solar-powered atmospheric water generators extract moisture directly from the air through condensation. While energy-intensive, these systems become increasingly viable as solar technology improves. The latest models can produce up to 100 liters of water daily from air with just 20% relative humidity, typical of many desert regions during cooler months. Beneath the surface, subsurface irrigation systems deliver water directly to plant roots, minimizing evaporation losses. Traditional irrigation loses up to 70% of water to evaporation in desert conditions, notes hydraulic engineer Dr. Ahmed Hassan of Egypt's Desert Research Center. With subsurface clay pot irrigation and modern drip systems, we can achieve over 90% efficiency. Soil modification represents another crucial intervention. Desert soils typically lack organic matter and microbial activity essential for plant growth. Researchers are developing specialized biochar, carbon-rich material produced by heating organic waste in oxygen-limited environments, tailored for desert conditions. This material dramatically improves water retention and nutrient availability while sequestering carbon for centuries. Perhaps most innovative are integrated growing systems that combine multiple technologies. The integrated desert agriculture platforms being tested in Mauritania feature V-shaped sunshades that reduce direct sun exposure, capture dew, and channel occasional rainfall to plant roots. These physical structures protect plants during the most extreme midday heat, while creating microenvironments where genetically modified crops can express their full potential. Beyond technical solutions, implementing desert agriculture requires navigating complex social, economic, and political landscapes. Land tenure systems in many Saharan regions follow traditional practices not always recognized by national governments, creating uncertainty that discourages investment in permanent agricultural infrastructure. Water rights remain contentious, with competing claims from agriculture, urban centers, and industry. The technical challenges of desert agriculture are substantial but solvable, observes Dr. Fatou Ndiaye, agricultural economist at Senegal's Cheikh Anta Diop University. The institutional challenges, creating appropriate policies, financing mechanisms, and governance systems, often prove more difficult. Desert agriculture requires not just new crops, but new ways of organizing human activity. These institutional challenges explain why some early desert agriculture initiatives have faltered, despite technical promise. Projects that fail to engage local communities, address land rights, or create sustainable economic models have generally proven short-lived, regardless of their scientific merit. Successful implementation thus requires interdisciplinary collaboration between scientists, engineers, economists, and social scientists. It demands engagement with local communities, not as passive recipients of technology, but as active partners in its adaptation and deployment. Transforming portions of the Sahara into productive agricultural land would profoundly reshape the economic and environmental landscape of northern Africa and potentially the global food system. The economic implications begin at the local level, where successful desert agriculture could create livelihood opportunities in regions currently experiencing high unemployment and outmigration. In rural areas bordering the Sahara, young people often see no future in traditional agriculture and migrate to already overcrowded cities, explains economist Dr. Aminata Diop of the Pan-African Agricultural Economics Institute. Desert-adapted agriculture could reverse this trend by creating knowledge-intensive farming opportunities that combine traditional wisdom with cutting-edge technology. Early economic modeling suggests that 1 hectare of desert-adapted crops could generate annual income of approximately $3,000, modest by global standards but transformative in regions where average incomes often fall below $1,000 annually. More importantly, these agricultural systems would produce food in regions currently dependent on imports, enhancing food security and resilience. The potential scale is substantial. Conservative estimates suggest that between 5 and 8% of the Sahara's land area, approximately 500,000 to 800,000 square kilometers, could potentially support some form of modified agriculture without depleting groundwater resources. This represents an area larger than France potentially added to the world's agricultural lands. However, economic viability depends heavily on input costs, particularly for water and specialized infrastructure. The economics improve dramatically when we integrate desert agriculture with renewable energy systems, notes Dr. Mohamed Al-Fassi of Morocco's Renewable Energy and Water Research Institute. Solar-powered water pumps, desalination plants, and atmospheric water generators create synergies that make the entire system more cost-effective. Indeed, some of the most promising desert agriculture initiatives are part of integrated development, projects that combine food production with solar energy generation. The massive solar installations being developed across North Africa, primarily to export renewable electricity to Europe, create opportunities for complementary agricultural activities. The shade provided by solar panels reduces water requirements for many crops, while the agricultural operations maintain the land around the panels and provide local economic benefits beyond energy production. From an environmental perspective, desert agriculture presents both opportunities and risks. On the positive side, well-designed systems can potentially reverse desertification by establishing plant cover that stabilizes soil, increases humidity, and gradually improves local microclimates. Certain desert-adapted crops, particularly legumes, can fix atmospheric nitrogen and begin rebuilding soil fertility in degraded areas. We've observed what we call the oasis effect in our test plots, reports ecologist Dr. Layla Mahmoud from Sudan's University of Khartoum. After just 3 years of cultivation with drought-adapted legumes, soil organic matter increased by 23%, and we recorded the spontaneous germination of native plant species that had been absent for decades. However, environmental concerns remain significant. Poorly designed irrigation systems can lead to soil salinization, rendering land permanently uncultivable. Excessive groundwater extraction can deplete ancient aquifers that took thousands of years to fill. And the introduction of genetically modified organisms raises questions about potential ecological interactions with desert ecosystems that, while sparse, contain highly specialized native species. Addressing these concerns requires comprehensive environmental impact assessments and monitoring systems. It also demands recognition that desert agriculture should complement rather than replace traditional farming in more favorable regions. The goal is not to transform the entire Sahara, an ecological system with its own intrinsic value, but to create productive transitions between desert and non-desert regions, particularly in areas already affected by human activity. As we look toward the future of desert agriculture, particularly in the Sahara, several converging trends suggest that the 2030s may become the decisive decade for this emerging field. Climate models predict that traditional agricultural regions will face increasing challenges from rising temperatures and changing precipitation patterns, making alternative growing regions not just desirable but necessary for global food security. Meanwhile, the technologies enabling desert agriculture continue to advance rapidly. Next-generation gene editing tools promise even greater precision and efficiency than current CRISPR systems. Artificial intelligence is accelerating the identification of useful genetic combinations by analyzing vast data sets of plant performance under various stress conditions. And materials science is delivering increasingly sophisticated growing systems that create protected microenvironments while minimizing resource use. We're approaching what some call the biological revolution in agriculture, observes Dr. Jean-Pierre Nohou of the Sahel Agricultural Futures Institute. Just as the green revolution of the 1960s and 70s transformed farming through chemical inputs and mechanization, this biological revolution will transform it through genetic engineering, microbial partnerships, and ecologically integrated systems. For the Sahara specifically, several large-scale initiatives are setting the stage for potential transformation. The Great Green Wall Project, originally conceived as a band of trees stretching across the width of Africa to halt desertification, has evolved into a more nuanced mosaic of sustainable land management practices. Desert-adapted agriculture increasingly features in these plans, with pilot projects established in Senegal, Niger, and Ethiopia showing promising early results. Similarly, Egypt's ambitious New Valley project aims to redirect Nile water to create new agricultural communities in the Western Desert. While initially dependent on conventional irrigation, these settlements are increasingly incorporating genetically modified crops to reduce water requirements and expand cultivable areas beyond the reach of irrigation canals. What we're seeing is a shift from thinking about deserts as barriers to be overcome to viewing them as unique environments with their own agricultural potential, notes Dr. Sarah Abdul-Rahman of Alexandria University's Desert Studies Center. This conceptual shift may prove as important as any technological breakthrough. Yet significant challenges remain before desert agriculture can achieve widespread implementation. Regulatory frameworks for genetically modified organisms vary widely across African nations, creating uncertainty for researchers and investors. International development funding still disproportionately supports conventional agricultural approaches, rather than the more speculative but potentially transformative desert agriculture initiatives. Perhaps most fundamentally, successful desert agriculture requires rethinking our basic conception of what successful farming looks like. Rather than pursuing maximum yield per hectare, the defining metric of conventional agriculture, desert systems must optimize for efficiency of resource use, particularly water. Rather than monocultures, they typically involve integrated polycultures that maximize ecological synergies. And rather than annual crops that require replanting each season, many desert systems emphasize perennial species that develop extensive root systems over years. We need to measure success differently, argues Dr. Hassan Ibrahim of the University of Khartoum. A hectare of desert agriculture producing 2 tons of grain while consuming minimal water and external inputs may ultimately be more valuable than a conventional hectare producing 5 tons but requiring intensive irrigation and chemical inputs. As these new metrics take hold and technologies mature, the Sahara may indeed witness a gradual transformation, not to a conventional agricultural landscape, but to a new type of productive ecosystem that respects the desert's inherent characteristics, while enhancing its capacity to support human communities. The potential implications extend far beyond northern Africa. Similar approaches could be applied to the Arabian Desert, the Atacama in South America, the Gobi in Asia, and other arid regions worldwide. Collectively, these environments constitute more than 1/3 of Earth's land surface, vast areas that could potentially contribute to human sustenance without competing with existing agricultural regions. In this vision of the future, the world's great deserts remain recognizably themselves, austere, beautiful, challenging, yet they also provide sustainable livelihoods and contribute to global food security through carefully adapted agricultural systems. It is a vision that honors both human ingenuity and the profound resilience of life itself.